At Red Lake, at Goldcorp, we had a strike that lasted for 46 months with the United Steelworkers. I got a death threat out of it. All the windows, basement windows and ground floor windows in my home were replaced with bulletproof glass.
Wow.
And there were some tense moments.
And we're back to the Crash Labs. So with me today, a very special guest and a great pleasure, Mr. Rob McEwen, someone who's taken a chance on me as an early entrepreneur multiple times. I'm not sure quite why, but I'm very, very appreciative. And Rob is very near and dear to my heart. And thank you, Rob, for being in today.
Well, thank you, Danny. And it was always a good thing to invest with you.
Well, thanks for saying that. So I guess let's start here, Rob. Like, there's been a lot of tumultuousness in the market these days. We had a big election in the United States. What do you make of all this? Like, what do you think? You know, the market's pulled back on the backs of that election. Do you think this is going to be a positive time for gold and silver and the commodity space as a whole, copper? Or do you think that with the optimism maybe garnered from the election in the United States by clearly a huge number of people, that we're going to continue to see this sort of tech bubble and, you know, U.S. dollar strengthen?
There's a lot of questions in there.
Sorry, it's a complicated question.
It is complicated. The world's complicated. No, I think that the reasons for owning gold still exist.
Yep.
There's excessive debt in the world, government, corporate, personal. There's an abundance of liquidity and a lot of speculation going on. I think interest rates, while the government probably wants to drive them down, I think they're going up because of the loss of purchasing power.
Sure.
What do I think about what's going on? I just think there's the tech might be getting out of hand, too overly optimistic. But I do think for metals and commodities, if you look at the S&P commodity index against the S&P 500, we are at the lowest point, we being, say, financials, relative to commodities, the lowest point in 54 years. And this is the third time in that 54-year period where commodities have been very, very undervalued. And I think they're going to bounce quite significantly. And part of that might be driven by a weaker dollar or other weaker currencies. I mean, you've seen gold in almost all the major currencies running into new high ground.
Right.
So the investors around the world are concerned about the purchasing power of their currencies, and they are moving towards gold. And you've seen the central bankers buying quite a bit of gold, unprecedented amount for the last 20. You know, we haven't seen that type of buying for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the most fascinating pieces of green technology is quite literally the mining regulations and the mining setup, the stewardship the mining industry has shown in that framework. Like, for instance, if you look at the principles of responsible investing, which is like all of these criteria now that various funds have that restrict their fund flows into, you're well aware of this, into companies that you know are coloring between the lines, let's say, in like a socially responsible, environmentally responsible way. The scorecards for mining companies are spectacular. They're really, really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it makes perfect sense. It's because you can't move a mine. A mine is where it is. And so you have to figure out how to work with the people around them. Around there, you have to come up with an environmental cleanup plan. Like when they build a new Amazon factory in, you know, somewhere, let's say, they lay the foundation. There's no remediation plan. There's no anything like that, right? Which is interesting. So, you know, I think many were likely shocked thinking mining would be the laggard and the problem when these principles of responsible investing. In fact, I don't know if you remember the ESG move and everybody's kind of panicking, like you have to have an ESG plan. It's like, turns out that the ESG scores and the principles of responsible, like the scorecard for the mining companies is the best. And it makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. in order to build a mine, you have to go through all of these things that other industries don't have to do.
That's right. Well, to that end, we're working on building a model for the mines of the future. In our copper project, about 2.5 years ago, I invited an architect in. He's considered the Steve Jobs of the green living building space. And he's set standards for sustainable building around the world. Done a lot of work with big tech companies in California and elsewhere. But I said, I'd like you to come and help us redefine mining and help transform the image of mining in the eyes of the public. And I had him sit down with our consultants, our management team, our engineers building this project. And we're looking at a copper mine that would be probably one of the 15 largest copper mines in the world. But it's all built on being much more sensitive to the environment. We would be, compared to a conventional copper mine, we'd be consuming less than a quarter of the water. We'd be, all of our power, there's a company in Argentina called YPF, big power provider, and they've said they'll give us 100% renewable energy from solar, wind, hydro. We'll be emitting, our fleets will be electric, and wherever possible, we'll electrify as much as we can. And we start by emitting 1/10 the carbon of a conventional copper mine. And the whole concept is, well, how do we use our resources better? Water's a scarce item, so how do we take that concern off the community's list? Looking at, we said, well, we're not going to have a tailings dam because this is in a seismically active area at the headwaters of a tributary for the main river going through the capital. Said, that's not a good thing to do. It's a heap leach process. And it's just when you start looking at the mining industry, because of this negative perception of mining and the lack of people going through schools, there's a real shortage of people in the mining industry now, and it's becoming more acute. So I said, well, we should be building accommodation that is not only beautiful, but desirable place to work. So we're looking at something that's picking up the technology of the Incas where they terrace the hillside and growing our own food there, managing our own water. It would be in a large glass structure, that hanging gardens, and a very desirable place to work, dealing with that competition for labor at a remote destination. And then as we go along, we have plans to put a hotel in there, trying to take mining and make it very transparent so that you invite the public to come in and see the operation. And this is in an area that's in the Andes, on the border with Chile. I've always found it a very beautiful area. It's stark, it's almost in the rain shadow, but it's, if you were a photographer, you just play with the different hours of the day and the colors. You see the metals cascading down the side, the colors, the blues, the greens, the yellows, the rose. And not too far away is some Inca trails. We're looking at the community and saying, look, your water management for agriculture is rather, it could need some improvement.
Sure.
What can we do to save water for you and offset any water that we might be using? About 3 weeks ago, I was in Paris, maybe 2 weeks ago. I was invited to speak at the Paris Peace Forum. Yeah. Which I thought was a really unusual place for a miner to be speaking.
To be speaking, yeah.
But they've suddenly become aware that we need more metal to protect the climate, to make the technologies, and how are mines changing their way. And it's really saying, well, here's some examples, and there's more to come from a lot of other companies in the space.
So that's a fascinating idea, and I think it's totally needed. But at the same time, I guess, just to round that out, how does that impact the cost of things? Like, can you do this beautification of the mining process and create this environment that is desirable to both work at and look at and all of this, how does that really affect the cost? Are we talking like double the cost?
No, no. I mean, there is a cost to it.
There is a cost to it, of course, yeah. So it's gotta
But
be-
you also have to weigh, will you get permission to build the mine?
Right,
Is
sure.
that the cost of your social license?
Okay.
And so in our PEA, we'll have a feasibility out in the first half of next year. But in the PEA, we put $200 million in there. We're fortunate that our projected costs, even with those costs in there, at this copper project, cash would be $1.02 a pound. So when you have copper trading north of $4, you got a 75% gross margin.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's. I think all projects have to be able to defend the position that there's a cost, and you have to make a difference there. You have to invest, absorb that cost to have the license to go forward.
I love how you've been always pushing the envelope with innovation in this industry, whether it be this approach now with the beautification of mining, to, we'll call it, is it fair to call it that in some ways? Or AI, or like AI, when we work together with Goldspot and things like that, and then going back to the Goldcorp challenge. Maybe we can talk people through that process, what that was like back in the day when you first created this challenge to innovate, open up your data set. Where did that come from?
It comes in increments.
Yeah.
We bought this mine, Goldcorp. We had a mine in Red Lake, Ontario, northern Ontario, and it was thought to be at its end of its life. It had a rich neighbor, but the mine had gone down when I bought it, and they thought it only had about 3 years left, and it had a history of difficult labor relations. I happen to think it would go longer than that because the rich mine next door. We said to our exploration department, here's $10 million, go explore. They came back, they went down a mile and found this rich occurrence. So at one point, our head of operations came in and said, well, we're going to tear down the old mill. That's about 50 years old, build a new one. And I said, how big is it going to be? And he said, this big. I went, that's not very big. And he said, well, that's all we found so far. But I thought, we're adding to our resources 30% a year. So I went to the head of exploration and said, how big will this deposit become? And he put up his hand and said, I don't know. I said, that's a bad answer. He said, how long is it going to take you to find out? I don't know, another bad answer. So while I was getting those answers, I had applied to a course at MIT on information technology because I had gone into the mining industry from the financial industry, and I thought, this industry is a little behind. Maybe I could learn something about IT and bring it. So when I went to MIT, I had this discovery in my mind, and I was thinking about these two questions. How big is it, and how long is it going to take? On the second day, right after lunch, I'm sitting there, and they start talking about open source and Linux, and I went, there it is. It was like a eureka moment.
Open source.
Yeah, and I thought, I ran back home, and I said, what we're going to do is take all our geological data, put it up on the web, and we're going to offer a prize. $500,000 for insights to tell us where we'll find the next 6 million ounces of gold in our mine. And I got a little bit of objections. My head of exploration said, oh, you can't do that. No one does that.
That's proprietary information.
That's proprietary.
Rob. You can't give those secrets away.
Exactly. And they were saying, someone might take us over. Someone might buy all the land around us. I said, we have 55,000 acres. When are we going to explore that? We're pretty safe there. And if someone takes us over, you have options, you have stock, and you're going to benefit. But I don't think they're going to take us over. So we ended up launching it in 1999, and there were 1,500 people from 50 countries that took down a 400 megabyte file. And it was a very extensive bibliography, all our geology. And what came back was remarkable. There was computer graphics, the like I've never seen. Actually, when I opened what turned out to be the winning contestant, I almost fell out of my chair. I said, where did this come from? I've never seen anything like this in the mining industry before. And I got on the phone because there were a couple of institutions in Toronto that had heard the story over a couple of years and they hadn't bought. And I called, there were three of them, I called them up and I said, give me 15 minutes of your time to each one of them, which they did that afternoon. And at the end of the day, there was 15 million shares bought by these guys because the picture showed them the potential. Then there were people coming in with organic solutions, which are often thought to be inorganic problem statements. And there was mathematics, that Bayesian analysis and that,
Sure.
You go, where did this come from? But it was just this amazing amount of knowledge that came. And at the end of the day, I thought, there are two things that I got away from this. One, it's how you describe the problem will determine the alternatives you can see. And the industry often gets caught in a channel and doesn't look very broadly for solutions. The other was that the biggest gold mine in the world is between everybody's ears. And how do you connect that? Because there are all sorts of answers that may not have been considered and should be considered. So we found $3 billion worth of gold, and Goldcorp, as a result of that, went from being a small name in the gold world to a larger name in the gold world.
One of the largest. Yeah,
Yeah.
insane.
And we ended up, our cost of production went from $360 an ounce to $60 an ounce, and our production went from 50,000 ounces to 500,000 ounces. So there was a 60-fold change in the economics of that mine alone.
I worked there. It's a fantastic mine. And it's probably the most spectacular, next to Newfound Gold, spectacular specimens of visible gold I think I've seen. And I guess that's a question for you. What do you think is grade king? Does that experience tell you that grade is king? I want to get back to the tech side of it, but
It gives you a lot of margin, certainly, to play with.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, blinds you to some opportunities.
oh, interesting. Okay.
We were 68 grams per ton. 2 ounces.
2 ounces per ton. Yeah.
But I remember when Malartic was developing, they were pitching this story, and it was low grade.
Like sub a gram.
A gram. And I thought, how's that going to work? And I discounted it. And I thought, I'm blinded because I was so got up in high grade. But Malartic became the biggest gold mine in the country.
Sure. And hugely successful.
Yes, but a giant open pit.
Tonka trucks
So
and
you
a sandbox.
really have to check yourself sometimes
Sure.
about possibilities. I had blinders on. I got conditioned to high grade, and probably in looking at other opportunities, I go, no, that's not good enough. I need this, or I need that. Maybe that's going to detract from our other story. So I have our copper project in Argentina. I can live with it because I translate it into a gold equivalent. So it's 37.6 billion pounds of copper. And I go, all right, what's the gold equivalent? Because I try to look at
Everything through the lens of gold.
Everything
I do
through the lens of gold, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I'm going, all right, 37. So if I take the gold price, divide it by the copper price, the product is the number of pounds of copper that equals an ounce of gold. So I went, all right, 37.6 billion, that's just under 60 million ounces of gold equivalent. And at $1 a pound, that's about $650 cash cost equivalent. And at $1.58, that's just over $1,000 all-in sustaining cost for 27 years. And we're only going to be mining, so far, less than 40% of what we've defined there.
It's a hell of a gold project.
And over 600,000 ounces a year, gold equivalent.
That's insane.
To me, that's a magnificent gold deposit. And it's almost as much gold as the Timmins camp has produced in the last 100 years. And that's one of the most prolific gold camps in the country.
That's pretty jarring when you think of it that way. When you convert it back to gold and then compare it as a gold person myself, comparing it to the districts you're talking about on that basis. Yeah, it's pretty staggering to think of it that way.
Yeah, I just go, all right, this is good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, just to dial that back. So you've taken chances. You've obviously taken many chances in your life on investing. I'm sure not all of them pay out, but you've taken chances on technology and innovation. It sounds like with this copper project, that's also a chance you're going to take, right? Is to say, hey, listen, this is going to be a new thing, and this may pay off big. Is that a fair assessment? Do you think it's more interesting to sort of innovate and take chances on that aspect of it, or is it more just about thinking outside the box and risk taking in general, whether it be, or do you kind of enjoy breaking the mold and doing something different?
I've never liked standing in line. If I'm standing in line, I know that the person in front of me is going to determine how quickly I get to the destination I want to go to. And let's say it's a bit of a line. I always thought in Goldcorp, we can't follow the leaders, right? Because we'll just eat their dust. So step out of line, and you can see your target once in a while, but I mean, it's very undulating. It's,
Sure.
You're going over hills and coming out of valleys. But I found every time I stepped out of line, I got to my target before I would have if I'd stood behind.
So you've been rewarded by stepping out of line, so to speak.
Yes.
And following your own, or paving your own road.
Yes.
Really. It's fascinating.
It comes with opposition at times.
Of course it comes with opposition.
A lot of people say, don't do that.
Well, no, because people are used to the conventions, right? They just want you to follow the formula that works, or that they know, they understand. And when you follow a different path, they're going to be critical of that. Almost always.
Yes.
That's a really, really, really fascinating thing to think about. So so you still invest in the treasure hunt. You still like to take chances every now and then in juniors. Of course, congratulations on the project, the copper project. I know you've been working on that for a very, very long time. So we're very excited to see what happens one day with that, hopefully soon, with the feasibility and everything underway. What other sort of things get you excited these days amidst the market? So we started this conversation talking about a sea of opportunity right now. Investors should be. You've been active investing in things. What are some stories that have jumped out at you?
Well, looking at projects, you look at what are the constraints or what causes delays. Permitting is a big issue. Building a facility is another time-consuming, capital-intensive. So I sort of look, who has infrastructure nearby? Like newfound gold?
Yeah.
You had highways, you had power, you had a community, all right there, and it was on surface, starting at surface. So that seemed like a pretty good combination. If you can find something today that, let's say it was a mine, and it was a mine when the gold price was much lower. So there's probably a chance there's some gold left over, or it might have closed when gold dropped at one point, and they didn't really look in the neighborhood for. Red Lake was a bit like that.
Sure.
So a former producer with infrastructure, roads, power, even better if there's a community nearby, and it'd be a bonus if it was permitted. The permit hadn't expired. So you could jump in, make an investment, and start getting a cash flow, a positive cash flow, earlier than waiting to permit that might take you 5, 10, or more years.
Yeah.
Then you got to get permission to build the road. You've got to get the power in, all those extra capital costs. So there are a couple of companies. There's Canadian Goldcorp. It's Manitoba. It was an old Tartan Lake mine. It closed. Manitoba has the lowest power cost in the country, below Quebec. The province is supportive of mining. the town of Flin Flon's nearby, and one of the mines closed, so there's experienced workforce in the neighborhood. I like that. Borealis is in Nevada.
We're in there. We're with you.
It has similar attributes in terms of past production and service area. Then there are other ones that are fringe. All of these I have an investment in, so I'm talking my own book. But
perfect. That's what people, they'd love to hear it.
Inventus has always intrigued me. It's a paleoplacer. It's north of Sudbury. They've got an extensive ground. It's very close to surface. It's somewhat akin to what the Witwatersrand in South Africa.
Sure, yeah.
A conglomerate belt that's going down, but very close to surface, not down deep like South Africa. So it would be relatively easy to mine. There isn't a community right next door, but it's not too far away. And they found gold up to 1 ounce material in these boulder matrices. So they're going off to do a drill program because sampling they got interesting values, but now they have to, it's harder to get a resource estimate on one of these deposits.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued by it because they've got a large land package. They've got lots of positive results, and so I'm willing to play with that. There's Goliath out in the Golden Triangle.
I've been following that one too.
They've got some nice high grade.
Sure.
Dryden is just northwestern Ontario.
Yep.
Some nice big grades. Whether or not they all come together
We've
and
got a
get more.
royalty on that actually at Earth Labs.
Yes.
Yeah, believe it or not. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's an interesting over that, and we're shareholders as well. So, but yeah, we played that one too. And there's a lot of overlap here.
There is.
Yeah.
So I've just been using this time. I keep our door open. At Goldcorp, I invested in a lot of juniors, and I always looked at it and said, well, one, it's a listening post for what's happening in the industry, and the other, I viewed it as a potential farm team that,
oh, cool.
If it got to a size, we might buy it. In the case of Goldcorp, we had the good fortune many of them ran, and they ran too far for me to think about absorbing the goodwill to bring them in, so I sold them, and it paid for the development of Red Lake. We made $80 million just buying stocks. And that probably comes from my background of having managed mutual funds, closed-end funds, and being in the financial industry for my first 18 years working.
Today, with the impatience of many young people investing, cryptocurrencies, things like this have been an attractive purchase for people because they get the reward of looking at their e-wallet and seeing, instant gratification, so to speak, within days, hours, weeks, months, let's say. But oftentimes with the ups and the downs of the mining industry and the cyclicity and the bumps along the road and the permitting and all this stuff that we have, it's not so, you have to be patient, it seems, to really kind of see these things through. Do you find that that your patience has grown over time with seeing investments through to fruition?
Well, patience is often driven by market cycles.
Sure.
You make an investment and it goes down, and you're saying, it's going to come back one day. I just don't know how long. I think I've become more a student of cycles.
Okay.
And saying there are times to buy. Rubicon would have been an example. It was in the Red Lake district. There's certain circumstances. Rubicon, the property they bought in Red Lake, it was near Goldcorp's property.
Yep.
And I wanted to buy it. But the person who owned it had price expectations that I didn't want to agree to. So then when Rubicon was formed and acquired that property, they came in and they said, would you invest? And I went, well, let me see. What do you have right now? You have a listing on Toronto and a listing on the Amex. You have a property in Red Lake, which is one of the high-grade gold camps around. Come back tomorrow. I want to think about this. Came back next day and I said, well, I've just staked 500,000 acres in Alaska around the Pogo deposit, and that's a rich mine up in Alaska. And you have an Amex listing, and you don't trade very much on that. I'm going to suggest that we roll that Alaskan property in with the Red Lake property, so you'll be in 2 high-grade camps, and I'm going to give you X number of dollars, and with that, I want you to develop a following in the U.S. And you have, you now have an American property as well. And they said, okay. And that stock, well, it delivered me a 16x in about a year and a half.
Wow.
And it was about how do you package the story. And they did have some good things going, and then they got too carried away saying it was going to be bigger and bigger without, and then we're going to mine it by primitive methods. So at one point I said, okay, I'm up 16 times. Am I going to get up and I'm going to double that or more? And I said, nah, I'll be happy with 16 times. And I went to GMP and I said, could you move this block? I had 28% of the company, and I said, I'll take it at a discount to market. So I got it at 4, it ran to 7, and then probably about 6 months later, it started going south in a big way.
A very big way. I remember it well. So that would be money manager Rob kicking in with some, hey, listen, I made 16 times. I'm probably not going to do 16 times again from here.
And that was sort of the same with Goldcorp.
Right.
I looked at it, we'd grown from 50 million to 8 billion and market cap. And I thought, how am I going to get much higher? Can I get a double or a triple or 10x on that? And I thought, that's a stretch.
It's a steep ask. Yeah.
So I said, we have, at the time, I bought Wheaton River, put it in, and I said, we now have 400 million in cash. We have no debt, and we're one of the lowest gold producers in the world. This is a good time to walk away. And then I can go see if I can find some juniors that I can get the type of return I'm looking for. I bought into U.S. gold right after I left. It was a Nevada play. And I thought, oh, this is working pretty well. I bought it for 36 cents a share. I bought a third of it. 7 months later, it was $9 a share. And I went, whoa, that was fast. I haven't even drilled a hole yet. Unfortunately, that was on the goodwill that I had from
the past deal.
From the past deal. And we've suffered from about 2018 to 22. There was we didn't deliver on guidance, and the market was just, it did what it always does when you don't deliver on guidance.
This was McEwen Mining.
Yeah, and we went south in a horrible way. I did feel a little bit like a baby harp seal off the coast of Newfoundland when the fishermen go out to harvest. And it was about 3 more years of just being clubbed, and justifiably. And I mean, I have a large investment in McEwen Mining and McEwen Copper. It's $225 million US.
Serious money.
Yeah. I take $1 a year in salary, and
I was going to just say that, volunteer, that you amidst all this, you also took no salary, which I think is, or $1 a year, which I think is pretty much you're the only person who's done that, right? In that position.
there are probably some people around doing that.
Okay, I'm not aware, but I was aware of yours. Yeah.
But no, it was just, it was really. It was a period I felt really badly for all the shareholders who'd come in. Mm-hmm. I saw some value drop there, but it is, you look at it and say, all right, how do we pull ourselves out of this? Just keep focusing on it and driving down the cost, belief of putting money into exploration and finding more to pull out of the ground.
Stay on the drawing boards.
Yes.
Head down, head to the grindstone, keep keep at it.
Yeah, and I think we're there now. We've got the copper and the gold assets are turning around, and the exploration has shown we've been able to build a larger resource base, and that'll become more evident in the first quarter of next year.
Wow. It's amazing because to hear your story, you go from, talking about you're pushing innovation, trying new things, experimenting, getting rewarded for that, parlaying success into more success and equally delivering, and then suddenly you dig in hard, you've got, your McEwen Mining, let's go. And you're faced with just pushing rope uphill in many ways, challenges, problems, and you got to fight through that, and all the while experience that with your shareholders and everything else.
There were things, when I look back, they seem sort of comical, but they were very expensive in terms of loss of share value.
Did it make you want to give up on this, and just hang up the skates and go, I don't want to do this shit anymore?
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. At our Black Fox mine in Timmins, we were using a contract crusher to crush the ore. And it was in the winter. There was this 3-story crushing facility sitting near night time. And it was cold enough that the conveyor belts weren't working that efficiently. So the operators thought, well, maybe if they're a little softer, they'd grip the ore better. So they got a big blowtorch and put it under one of the conveyor belts that are made of rubber. And they said, oh, it's time to go to dinner. So the 2 operators went to dinner. They had dinner. When they came out, there was a fireworks going on. The conveyor belt had caught fire, and it's 3 stories of conveyor belts, and this whole complex was on fire, and not just on fire, it melted the steel, and it was so intense. So we were 8 weeks without being able to crush any ore, which meant 8 weeks without any revenue. And then, so you go, I think we better pick better contractors, and they have to screen their employees, make sure they're not these people that are missing something in their mind.
Well, and for the people that haven't actually done production, listening, when you got something that goes wrong like that in your processing chain or even at the mine, you got a problem where you're down, that critical piece is down, you still got to pay all your people. You still got all of those operating costs, and not having the revenue coming out of, that hurts. It hurts real bad.
It did.
And it hurts on the quarterly guidance. It hurts, which is always a carrot that just keeps getting further and further in front of your nose.
That's right. And in Nevada at our Gold Bar mine, it's northern Nevada, 2 years ago there was a rapid snow melt, and suddenly the upper plains, which are dry desert, there's sagebrush and that on it, but it was flooded. The only way we could get to the mine was by boat or helicopter.
Holy shit.
And so production shut down. You go, oh, come on. You're in the high desert. How do you get a flood?
In the middle of the desert.
In the middle of the desert.
Yeah. On Battle Mountain, literally south side of Cortez, right? Battle Mountain.
It's like one of those things you heard going through college when people are sitting around smoking and they're going, how did that scuba diver drop out of the sky and land in the forest?
Yeah, geez, like a perfect storm of random things.
Yeah. So you have these events that you don't anticipate, some of them. But there's a lot of changes there. I mean, at Red Lake, at Goldcorp, we had a strike that lasted for 46 months with the United Steelworkers. I got a death threat out of it. All the windows, basement windows and ground floor windows in my home were replaced with bulletproof glass.
Wow.
And there were some tense moments there. At the end of the day, the union decertified. I think it was the first time the steel workers walked away from any mine in North America. They said, we are not going to renew. Because during the strike, I took the collective agreement, tore it up, and rewrote it because I thought we needed to introduce technology and improve the skill sets of everybody working at the mine, and we had to improve, and that would improve the efficiency of it. But as we were negotiating, every time I went to the negotiating table, I reduced what we were going to pay. So the unions used to pulling back and management coming up. We went in the opposite direction. Did, however, offer the striking workers, in addition to the wages and benefits, I said, well, we'll give you stock options. And we gave each of them 50 options on 15,000 shares. And I thought we should give them to prevent the possibility of someone vandalizing our site and destroying some equipment. So, but I also said when the strike was over and the union said they weren't going to give any more strike pay and there'd be no more union at the mine, I said before we take anybody back, they have to go through attitude training, adjustment training.
I wonder what that's like.
So we took back, there were 180 went out, we took back 60.
My wife gives me attitude adjustment training,
Yes.
I think, every night.
Anyhow, it's just, it was an unfortunate period, but it was really good because the strike coincided with the conclusion of the Goldcorp challenge. Because the strike went from 1996 to 2000, and we awarded our winners at the PDAC in March of 2000. So all of a sudden there was all this information out there about Red Lake, and there was a rush of people into the district at that point, and they were anxious to pick up anybody, hire anybody who was not working, because they were in the bush looking for another Red Lake.
Another Red Lake. Wow. And just like that, too, the injection of the excitement from the challenge, the discovery, etc., ended up garnering
A huge gold rush. It was the third
huge-
gold rush
right.
in the Red Lake District. One in the 20s, one right after World War II, and then the one we triggered.
and totally changing the psychology, I'm sure, of people that felt, frustrated from this lead up event with this union stuff and all this craziness.
And then, what surprised me, I thought, okay, our geologists been out exploring Red Lake and that. But then a company comes along called Great Bear. And I'm going, what? Look what they're finding there. How come we weren't? And I asked our former geologist, how come we didn't
What did he
see?
say?
Well, Noranda was in there and some of the other big mining companies, they didn't find anything. And I went, I've heard this before.
The Confederation rocks. Yeah, because it was always bomber assemblage. If you didn't
That's
stay
right.
within the bomber group rocks, then you didn't go into the Confederation
Just caught with the blinders on.
Totally. Dogma.
Yes.
Dogma.
And then the Great Bear came along, and I remember them showing me it, and I went, okay, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you've caught a couple of the big ones. You seem to be there. You've got an ear for them in the deal flow.
You have to keep the door open, and you have to, there's early on, you'd see people come in and sometimes say, I don't want to talk to these people. I just don't want to talk to them. Just the way they behave or dress or whatever.
Sure.
And I said, slap myself on the face, Rob, no, you have to listen.
Yeah.
Because these people are out in the field, they're working, they're digging.
They're trying.
They're trying. And you never know who's going to turn it up,
Totally.
right? I mean, you look at Boise's Bay.
Yeah. 2
2 geologists in a helicopter seeing a color anomaly on the side of a hill.
Yep.
And they were looking for diamonds, and Friedland didn't want to talk to them when he said nickel. They talked about nickel.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy when you think about that. I know Matt, like when I started at Pine Tree, and Matt told me the same thing. He said, talk to everybody, or Sheldon even. Talk to every single person. See every deal. See everything. Because you just never know.
No.
And the oddity of it is that I saw guys with this polish and patina and pedigree that would come in and pitch, raising that next financing, whatever it would be. But I oftentimes was surprised about how impressed the most impressive ones were never those ones. You know, sure, they're impressive because you get why they made it a few times, or you get why they're good at this, and why doors open for them because they're good speakers and they're good presenters and they look the part and they speak the part. But then sometimes you find these, total wild cards, right?
Yes.
And that's what it's about.
And that's what shows that there's this, we haven't dealt with all the potential in this country. There's a lot more to be found. And it's just, it's one of the highest paying industries in the country. It has one of the highest economic multipliers of any industry. And you just say, why are our politicians we're a tiny contributor to global warming, and yet our government's tried to decimate an industry that has, as you said much earlier, has done a good job of being environmentally sensitive.
Yeah, quite literally. There's look, it's like anything, there's bad hunters in the hunting business. There's bad, I'm sure there's bad, airlines in the airline business. There's bad operators in every in every industry, right? And mining's not special. There's going to be bad operators in mining too that are going to, rotten tomatoes, as CJ puts it. And he comes every now and then you come across a rotten tomato or one makes headlines, And sometimes accidents happen too, right?
Exactly.
Like anything else. But en masse, I think people in this industry, quite frankly, at least the ones I've met, whether it's geologists or mining engineers, those types of people that were gravitated towards this science and this discipline and this industry, usually came at it because they're kind of outdoorsy. They like the outdoors. They like this kind of stuff. So they have that in them, And so, it's just a shame to me that it's just got such a bad rap.
I was presented at a meeting of the SME, a mining association, down in New York in May. And my title of my speech was, "Become a Nudist, Stop Mining." And it was all about showing what happens when you start removing metals from life. There's a short video on the web that's very good. It just, everything starts disappearing in your life.
Your phone, your everything.
Your phone, your furniture, your shingles on your house, the airplane that you want to go on vacation, your car.
Totally.
And that isn't really appreciated by the general public. And that needs to be shown to them. That's the other side of the coin, that how much modern civilization is dependent on what comes out of the ground.
Yeah, and I think if you listen to like a lot of the, more prominent business figures or celebrity figures right now, in general markets, let's say like Elon Musk, who you've gone to space with Elon, right? And so people like this, obviously pushing for electric cars, all this kind of thing, basically, in terms of the green movement, he should be on like the Mount Rushmore of people pushing towards, a greener existence as humanity.
Yes.
But yet he's been, caught up, we'll say, into the political stuff. And all the while he's remained consistent. He's actually an advocate for mining. I've heard him say it many times. Like mining is a necessary part of what we're doing here, and it's not all evil and bad. And many business people have come out and said that.
Yes. I didn't go to space with him. I went on a zero gravity flight.
Oh, sorry, you went to zero gravity.
Which is simulated weightlessness.
Yeah.
But
to mimic space experience. But who'd you go with?
It's a pre-qualification to. My wife and I are going up with Branson in his space flight whenever he gets ready to go.
Oh, really? But when you went up with Elon, it was you, Elon, James Cameron.
Yeah, and Jim Giannopoulos, the head of Fox Studios, and Peter Diamandis, the head of X Prize. And we were all on the board of X Prize on the Vision Circle. And X Prize out of LA that its mission is to advance technological adoption and they put incentives in front, large incentives, to fund progress.
So they do, like, basically you go up in this airplane, they do kind of a zero gravity
Yes.
experience, and then you're floating there.
Yeah, they
cool.
simulate it. You get 15 bouts of zero gravity for 30 seconds. And the planes, it's a 737. They take out 2/3 of the seats, the front 2/3. They line it with gym mats, the floor, the wall, the ceilings. And then when it's going up and it dives, it's like you're sitting in the back seat of a car with your parents are going over a hill when you're a kid and you just sort of feel lighter. You
Oh,
float.
yeah.
Well, this way you start floating off the ground and they'll put water up, throw some water, it goes into little spheres and you can gulp it down. We picked up one person, got them to bring their knees up to their chest and pass them the length of the plane like a volleyball down the plane. I took my eldest son, who was 12 at the time, and he did a hamster run where you're just sort of floating off the floor. You pull with your fingers, you're scooting across parallel to the floor. You go up the wall, over the ceiling, and back down.
Wow.
I mean, it's really, I would highly recommend to anyone just to get that experience. There was a couple that was on that flight as well. It was their second time. They were in their early 70s, and they just wanted to do it again and again. It's just
Now, when you went to Egypt recently, did you go for business or pleasure?
pleasure.
Was it cool?
It was.
Was that the first time you saw the pyramids?
Yes. I went into one of them.
I want to go so bad.
Yeah, well, since I was about this tall,
Yeah.
I'd always wanted to go to Egypt. And
Did it blow your mind? Like, was it
well,
like...
yes, it's just, you marvel at the skill set, the artistry, and the scope of the engineering. It just, how did they do that? Most of the world was hunter-gatherers at the time.
Sure,
Where
or
did
so we're told. We're told.
Yes, so we're told. Where did it come from? How did it evolve? The mathematics, the engineering, the artistry. You go in and some of the tombs, we saw King Tut's and there's
Like
a
the
great
King's
museum.
Chamber, all
Yes,
that kind of
we
stuff.
went right up into the chamber, in the big pyramid in Giza. And, no, it was fascinating. And I didn't realize crocodiles are one of the gods in their universe of gods. But they mummified crocodiles. And they do it with baboons and cats and bulls.
All kinds of animals,
and
yeah.
bulls. But one temple went into, there must have been about 20 crocodiles that have been turned into mummies.
Oh, I'm fascinated by some of the artifacts that have come over there. I've always been interested in it. I've always been a skeptic about, I've always dreamed about what was it for? What was the intention of these pyramids? Yes. What were they built for? All of that. So very jealous when when I called and you said, yeah, you're on your way. I was like, cool. Was it safe? Did you feel safe when you were there?
Never had to worry about it.
Really, eh?
No.
Yeah.
No. There's a lot of changes going on in Egypt. They're putting new highways in. They're building. What surprised me was Cairo's 26 million people. Mm-hmm. That's almost half the population of Canada in one city. The country is over 100 million people. So it's got a very rapidly growing population. They're going to have to be dealing with some issues, but they're pushing into the desert more and more. They're trying to expand the infrastructure in that. And tourism is clearly a very big industry for them. You saw all sorts of expressions of the tourist industry, like lots of boats, lots of trucks, buses. Many of them were still idle.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But going to the pyramids, walking up in the pyramids, it was fairly crowded inside, and it's not a large opening until you get right to the top.
Super cool. Anything on your bucket list that you want to check out? Like any other kind of wonders of the world, so to speak, that you haven't gotten a chance to see?
Well, there are lots in the world to see.
Sure.
Antarctica. Go to Göbekli.
That's where I want to go too. Yeah, Eric likes it too.
Okay.
Yeah, like Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool, right?
That's in Turkey. And Lake Titicaca up in the high Andes,
Yeah.
where the Incas came from, they say. They're just looking at some of the megalithic structures that exist from times well before ours and just say, who engineered that? How did they? The architects, the engineers laying it out. How long did it take? I went to Angkor Wat, and it's massive. And you just go, all right.
Yeah.
There's a level of intelligence and skills that are hard to conceive when you think of the historical line of the progression through time of civilization. You say, well, some were clearly far ahead of many other places in the world.
Well, yeah, just like there is today. I mean, look at it would be really bizarre to think that back then it was any different than today in the sense that you'd have some civilizations that were actually quite remarkably advanced, and then some in civilizations that were hunter-gatherer.
Yes.
It'd be a mix of both, I would assume. It's just fascinating that the narrative is such that it lays out the anthropogenic timeline of social sophistication to be such a linear line.
Yes.
Like it's from hunter-gatherer, fairly linearly straight through. But like you, I've seen some fascinating things. Like one for me was the Roman aqueducts.
Yes.
In Spain, like particularly Segovia, and you just see how those are laid out so beautifully, the stones, everything about it, and the gradient for the distances these aqueducts travel it's just so precise. It's so fascinating that you're able to have that type of precision with working with these massive blocks, and that they're still standing today.
Yes. Exactly.
Or like when I remember going to Rome, and they had all the streets, like the marble streets, and they had excavated sort of like the old, part of Rome, and these streets were level, like they were, and the person that was guiding was saying, yeah, at one point these would have been like glass. You would have been able to rollerblade on these suckers, right? I'm thinking, but even the grate, like the sewer grate, was a piece of marble that was graded out, and all of the individual
bars or
like holes in the in the sewer cap kind of thing, that was all carved out of stone, and they were all perfectly symmetrical and parallel. And you're going,
how?
And also why? Like why not just make random holes if you're primitive and whatever? No, it had to be.
Well, you saw that with the granite sculptures of the gods and different parts of their life, and you just go, how did they carve those very sharp lines and the very smooth surfaces? And going, that'd be very hard to do today.
Even with the most sophisticated tooling of the day, it'd be very difficult. And some of that rock, granite, oof.
I think when you do a lot of traveling, you want to do more.
Cool.
When I finished grad school, I hopped in a converted army truck and drove from London to Kathmandu. And
How's your Spanish now?
I didn't have to speak it on that trip.
No, but now that you're going and spending some time,
I need more time.
Yeah?
Yes.
Brushing up on it. Okay.
Considerably.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for coming in today. It was really a treat. I could keep talking to you forever, but conscious of your time, and
thank you, Danny.
I really, really appreciate you coming in, and hopefully you'll come back.
All right.